I'll call this meeting to order. How y'all doing tonight? I hope everybody's doing good. Appreciate y'all coming. Why don't we go around the room and for the folks on the committee and tell us who you are, and so everybody knows. Some of the people on the planning board might not know the Park and Rec people, but so John, could you start us off here?
I'm John Vandereet on the planning board.
I'm Jacqueline Wilson, and I'm on the planning board as well.
Mark Newman on the community committee.
I'm Amber. I'm also on the community committee.
Ben Diaz, and I'm also on the community.
In the park.
And then we got a gentleman in the lobby there. It's on the Park and Rec committee, right?
He's Bill Smith. He's also community committee.
Right. Okay. Well, thank y'all for coming tonight. And I'll turn it over to Alex and Jesse. They got some information they want to share, and then we can just have some dialogue between each other.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor, and good evening to everybody. Nice to see everyone. I think I know everybody. Forward to kind of continuing to work with you. So the reason behind this meeting, the idea is the board really wanted to try to kind of increase the resident engagement. We recognize that a lot of folks just don't want to engage, right? They're busy with their day-to-day life, try to get them the information they need, but really capture the people that really want to be involved, like yourselves, and make you feel informed and part of the process. So what we're thinking about is just having me go through the budget message with y'all. That's a good kind of really high level, 10,000 feet overview of kind of where this budget's at. And then have Miss Jessie Williams, who's our finance officer, kind of like a town CFO, if you will, kind of show you some more information. And I hope this will be a little bit informal. So feel free to interrupt me, answer any questions you might have, and then turn over for really conversation between the board and committee members. Okay, everybody? All right. So, yeah, absolutely. So, the local government budget process, it kind of seems like it's year round. It really starts.
It is year round.
Yeah, for us it is, right? But really we kind of start doing preparatory work and super high level, the manager kind of works with the staff to create a budget. It's not just for whatever the manager feels is right in his or her own head. It's more based on our policies, our procedures, the priorities that the council set in our strategic planning process, and then present that proposed budget to the board, and that's happened. And so we've got a proposed budget, if you will. A public hearing in June, and a lot of work has gone into that, both from the council side and the staff side. And so that's it on an annual basis. But several years ago, the board at the time looked and said, hey, in local government, there's really a tendency to go year to year and just worry on balancing it year to year, right? And just worry about next year. And what we found is that we were losing sight of the bigger picture trends. And so the board took a very wise approach and said, we need to take a multi-year approach to financial planning. Not only that, but really strategic planning, if you will. And so as such, they started doing 5-year forecasting. Now forecasting, it's an inexact science. It's kind of in some ways strategic guessing. So we've got to take it with a grain of salt. But it helped us spot trends and really take a bigger multi-year approach when we're doing budget.
At the door to that budget.
That's
before they do the budget.
Yeah, that's right. So we knew because of that multi-year financial process that this year's budget process, like last year's, was going to be really difficult. And there's 6 really reasons for that. So the first is inflation. Even though inflation has gone down a little bit, it's still there, right? And that the costs are still increased. I think it's a lot of the reason that we as just the public feel that inflation is still so difficult, because the numbers, the increases aren't as high as they were back in the peak of 2022, but they're still there. And so the town, like everybody in our normal day-to-day lives, the cost of everything just went up. Whether it's trash collection to buying police vehicles to asphalt to even office supplies. Everything went up. Now, along with that, personnel costs went up too. We saw big costs in labor, big spike in labor costs. And the majority of our costs when it comes to labor is related to police. It's our biggest department. That's not unusual. And it really was a huge spike for us. The third reason is because our residents were asking for increased services in some situations. So we wanted to have more funding for roads so that our roads wouldn't deteriorate faster than we were putting in funding for. After the Harvey Uvalde school shooting tragedy, adding a full-time SRO officer, adding new parks, new greenways, upgrading the ones we have, improving roadside cuttings and aesthetics. A lot of different things that our citizens asked for. Council responded with adding a lot of those services. There's also a number of council-led initiatives, town center development, which we're still actively working on now. Fifth reason is ARPA funds. ARPA funds, it's basically federal funding that we got through the big COVID relief bill. Now, this is a big loss because it's basically like pulling 20% of our revenues out of our budget. This isn't a situation that the town is in it alone. Far from it. If you've been paying attention to the news, you'll see it, not just in local government, but hospital systems, school systems, nonprofit, and all sorts of for-profit corporation businesses that are affected by this. So it's a huge, huge budget loss for us. And finally, the sixth reason is the towns is in a position where we can cut a big chunk of our budget without cutting core services. About 70% of our budget is fixed by contract or either market forces. So look at it just ignoring all the other factors. We lost 20% of our revenue and about 70% of our costs are fixed. So we may ask ourselves, what does that mean they're fixed? Well, our solid waste collection contract, street maintenance, and labor costs, those are our three highest fixed costs. That makes up 70% of our budget. So with solid waste contract, you might say, well, why don't we just go out and bid it out now? Well, if you benchmark against our other regional partners, you'll find that our trash costs are already amongst the lowest. It's a product of really aggressive negotiating by the council and the town with our trash contract, try to keep that cost as low as possible. And so the concern would be that if we bid it out again, not only will we not get a lower cost, but cost might go up. The second one is street maintenance. That's largely market driven, right? The cost of contractors, asphalt, things that we don't have control over. And again, labor costs, competitive pay. We have to pay our staff a market rate. If we don't, they'll go somewhere else. And so that's key for attracting and retaining good folks. And we aren't sloppy with the way we do it. We're very strategic and precise. About once every 3 to 5 years, we have an outside compensation expert come and do a salary analysis and determine what the right amount should be for our staff. So you take all those pressures and you combine them in, and that's why we continue to have difficult budget conversations. Fortunately, because of the multi-year financial planning approach the board and the town have taken, we've been able to kind of address this head on. But really what this comes down to is the town and the council have had to grapple with a key question. And it's as simple as this. Should we raise taxes or should we cut core services? That's the key question. So when you talk about cutting core services, what does that mean? And it's really some things that would be really difficult conversations, probably super unpopular. They seem draconian in some cases. So it could be things like cutting trash collection frequency. Maybe instead of picking up trash every week, it's every other week, limiting recycling. Now, there's some fallacies with that approach, right? Because we're not gonna all start having less trash, right? If we pick up less, it'll just be more in the can, things like that. Reducing police shift coverage. Obviously, nobody wants to have a slower response time if there's an emergency. And we've had staffing studies recommending that with the growth of town to continue to add police officers. Closing parks, right? Deferring road maintenance, you wouldn't get rid of it. You would just pass the cost into the future at a later rate. So things that are, to put it diplomatically, uncomfortable, unpopular, nobody wants to do. But that's what we mean when we talk about cutting core services. And so at the same time, our board was really sensitive about being sure to not just raise taxes willy-nilly, right? To do it with blinders on. Our board is, and the town are very sensitive about the financial burden that taxes impose on our residents. So that was something that we heard the council grappling with the whole time. On one hand, we need to provide these services, they're super important. On the other hand, we want to be mindful and good stewards, mindful of the impact on our residents. So ultimately, what this budget does is it takes a more balanced approach. The board has chosen to kind of maintain core public services, use reserve funds to help fund capital expenditures in accordance with town policy. You know, you can't use your reserve funds to fund like operational expenses. It's just like with our own financial household expenses. You can't use savings to fund reoccurring expenses, right? Because eventually they run out. But there's kind of one-time expenditures that you can use. It's appropriate for it. You just don't want to build up fund balance. The town has been very conservative and is fiscally and has built up a really healthy fund balance, and the board wants to tap into that for the benefit of our residents. Finally, not finally, but a couple more things. These are the hard things from a resident standpoint. Reducing the tax rate, but that's not as good as it sounds because we've had a property reevaluation. Reducing it from 21.6 cents to 19.6. That's a 2-cent reduction from the current rate, but it's a 4-cent increase over the revenue neutral rate. So what does that mean to you all? Well, everybody's homes are valued differently, right? We can't give you a custom. It's going to depend on how much it impacts you based on your property values, things like that. And so for the average homeowner, again, there'll be more and less. That equates to an estimated annual monthly cost of $20.64. There's also an additional $25 annual fee for motor vehicle tax that would be aimed at going towards street. So if you live in the average home, let's say you have 2 cars at your house, that would account to about $25 extra per month. Again, if your value is more than the average, it would be more. If it's less, it would be less than that. But that's a good.
Yeah, I think you said that wrong. It's 25 per year.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
25 per month, man. We're gonna,
Yeah.
the pitchforks are about to come out.
And I probably misspoke. It actually is $25 per year if you combine the
Oh.
motor vehicle cost.
Okay.
Yeah,
I gotcha.
But I'm glad you pointed that out because that's the right one. It's an important one, right? The $25 is an annual cost when you pay your taxes annually and redo your you'll pay it then. But it amounts to, if you do it, about $25 per month. If you take the $20.64 plus the about $2 a month for the. Now this budget isn't a done deal. It's still got to go through the process. There's some decision making that the board has to make, so I'm sure they're open to any feedback that you may have. And even though this is a lot to consider, it still doesn't mean the town is free and clear. We still are grappling with the same issues where costs are going up, and we're going to have to kind of continue to make difficult decisions into the future. And so that's the general fund side of things. That's basically everything when you think of local government, that's what it is. Police, it's roads, parks, things like that. We also have a stormwater fund, which probably isn't as sexy, it's not in the limelight as much, but it's very important. We maintain stormwater in the town. We're fortunate not to have to do any increases on that. As we've grown, we've been at, what I like to call the awkward teenage years of growth, right? We were big enough to where, we were really contracting a lot of things, but small enough to where we're doing that, but not big enough to make it work from bringing things in-house. Well, we started to bring a lot of our functions in-house now, and we're saving a lot of money. And so we've been able to not increase the stormwater basically getting more efficient and effective in what we do by doing more things in-house versus contracting out. So as always, want to thank the staff, the mayor, and the council for your work on it, and for you all for being here and taking a vested interest in the town. Thank you. So that's all I've got. I know Jesse's got some information to share, but wanted to pause if there are any comments from the council, anything you wanted to say, or any pressing questions that you all might have.
Right, well, again, thank y'all for coming. We appreciate your interest and wanting to be involved in all this. And I don't know what all you do know and what you don't know as far as the budget goes, so I may give you more or less information than you want. So just ask any questions. So as Alex said, the budget, this has been a long process for us, but the budget is governed by state statute. They require that we have a balanced budget, and they actually dictate what that balanced budget means. And it's balanced when revenues or new money plus fund balance appropriations, our savings account, equals expenditure appropriations, what we plan to spend. And so, as he also said, we have provided a proposed budget to council. That budget was $12.29 million. This is the breakdown of the revenue side of that budget. You will see that the vast majority of it is coming from ad valorem taxes, which I know is probably the biggest area of concern for everybody because of that reval he mentioned. But one thing to note is that that is not the only category and tax that's not the only tax that's in that ad valorem tax category. That ad valorem tax is also, it's real property, which is your homes that went under reval, but it's also personal property and motor vehicles. And another thing to note is that part of Stallings is in Mecklenburg County. And so the properties that we have in Mecklenburg County did not undergo reval. So, you know, while we are cognizant of everybody going through reval, we have to still take into consideration how it impacts the town and the revenues as a whole. And the other thing to point out on here, with the fund balance appropriation, that like we've said, is kind of like our savings account. We did adopt a new fund balance policy this year. Council did in December. So this budget included a fund balance appropriation of $428,000. $40,000 of that was in restricted police forfeiture funds, and then $388,000 of that was for one-time capital items, because as it's mentioned, you know, it's not the smartest thing to use your savings account to fund ongoing recurring expenditures, because that money will eventually run out. So we are only proposing to use the fund balance money to fund one-time items. And then this is just showing the breakdown of expenditures by department. As you would expect, the police department is by far the most expensive department that we have. They make up half of our staff here, and they are very important with what they do. And then this is by category. Another thing that you would expect too is that personnel does make up the vast majority of our costs because it does cost to run a town. And then we have the operating expenditures. Solid waste is a huge cost to us as well. Although we do have a great contract, it is quite expensive to provide that service. And in this one, this is more of a comparison of the history of our revenues. So it's kind of a trend of the different revenues. It's 100% of all revenues every year. Obviously, the revenues are not the same each year. It shows you the total at the top. So there's a high of $13.01 million in '24 and a low of 6.68 in fiscal year 18. But as you can see, they kind of like the ad valorem taxes, they're shifting. So fiscal year 26 is the first year in this whole chart that you'll see we're relying on those taxes to make up more than 60% of our revenues. Another thing to note on here is these kind of peachy colors. This is the ARPA money that Alex was referring to. So this is a huge loss for us. In '23, that was just under $2.1 million and 16.5% of our revenues. In '24, that was $2.64 million and over 20% of our revenues. And in our current year, this is our adopted budget because we're still in this year. So this portion here was $665,000 or 6% of our revenues. With the interest that we continued to earn, we actually ended up transferring $728,000 or 7.2% of revenues to date. And so those funds are now gone. Now, what we used those funds for was to pay for police department personnel costs. So obviously the expenditures that we used that money for did not go away. And so we are still having to fund those costs. We just lost the revenue source we were using to pay those funds or to pay those costs. Those are the two big things to note out of this chart is that 60%, we're now relying on the taxes to fund over 60% and the ARPA made up in those 3 years. So now, in talking about that fund balance and our savings account, this shows our history of that. So this is 9 years of history. It includes our current year and 8 prior years. So basically every year except for one, we have adopted a budget with an appropriation of fund balance. That second column shows you that amount of unrestricted fund balance. I won't go into this too much. There are different categories of fund balance. Some are restricted by statute or grants or different things, but the unassigned or unrestricted is basically what can be spent on basically any day activities, just everyday things. So this is what we're doing, or what we've appropriated for the budget with the unrestricted fund balance. So as you see, we're relying on that every year. The color-coded items, the red is where we're just doing that, where we've appropriated that just basically to balance the budget. We're doing that with our ongoing operating expenses. We're paying our debt payments, And the last time we actually had a revow, we opted to appropriate $333,000 with that adopted budget, so as to try to keep the tax rate low then. And then the column over to the right lets you know what the remaining fund balance at year end is. Now, one thing to note about that is that, as I mentioned, council adopted a new fund balance policy in December of just December of this year, 24. So prior to that, we had a different minimum fund balance requirement. It was only 20%. Now it's 34%. That's per guidance from the local government commission. It's because of a cash flow issue, since the majority of our revenues come from taxes. We can't spend all of our money. We need to make sure that we keep money on hand in order to have when we're not bringing in a lot of money. But as you can see, we do have a healthy fund balance, which is why we don't have a problem appropriating the $388,000 with this budget. But again, we do need to move towards a budget in the future, and the fund balance policy that council has adopted moves away from the color-coded items and not appropriating fund balance just to balance the budget. It moves towards adopting a budget that would specifically use those items for one-time funds, not those recurring everyday activities. And then, so the big thing, obviously with this revow, where did the tax dollars go? Because taxes are a huge part. But as you can see from this, the tax dollars don't go as far as you would like to think that they do. Prior to 24, the tax dollars could fund personnel costs, solid waste, and the town-funded street maintenance. So we have basically two pots of money for street maintenance. There are restricted funds that we get from the state. They're state restricted. It's from the gas tax. They can only be used for that. And then the council has prioritized funding streets. And so then we also put town funds in there as well. And so this chart is only contributing town funds. And so as you can see on this line, so effective 24, the tax dollars, go back, sorry. So as of 24, the tax dollars are no longer enough to cover just personnel, street maintenance, and solid waste. So that's what this chart is now showing. So, either, like Alex said, we either have to, and that's using the 19.6 tax rate for fiscal year 26. So we either have to look into increasing taxes, or we have to figure out some ways to fund things differently or cut services. Now, the 26 budget is balanced. We do have a proposed budget. This is just to kind of show you what the tax dollars are able to cover. And then this one shows the expenditure history. It's the same concept like the other one. It's just total expenditures, which are going to vary greatly from year to year. And that's really all this one is showing. Again, personnel. Oh, I'm sorry, David. Yes, sir.
You go back one, please.
Sure. Aaron.
It appears that street maintenance was not a town priority for a long time. And now we've decided a few years ago that we've had, Kevin would fill in, what was the name of the analysis that did the pavement review? Yeah, that's the one. So we know that we need to, how many, 54 miles of town roads-ish? So we know that they are deteriorating, and that figure a couple years ago was $800,000 per year just to keep those 54 miles maintained, replaced. And we hadn't done it wow. Last time we had a significant number was in 17. And so that's where we're at now. We could drop it, but we would need to, those roads would deteriorate pretty fast, I think. Some of them are on the bottom of that list.
The long of it is like, kind of just add, takes about $1 million right this minute per mile, right? To pave one row. So to pave every road in Stallings, $54 million. And so if you kind of extrapolate that out, it was gonna take us like 80 years to pave every road in Stallings. So there are some roads that people could get born on, live there their whole life, and die on, and never see their road repaved.
Well, you turn into gravel
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah. Huh.
And
So this, I think we dropped it down to 60 years with this. That was the plan.
it's much improved, but it's not, I don't think 60s. What was the time frame on that? What does the 800,000 get us?
So the 800,000, that is a projection based off the software that we use to
Right.
basically, if we use that budget and incorporate different roadway maintenance techniques, that $800,000 will maintain a 70 or above PCI value, pavement condition index value. And that 70 was the council goal to maintain. So that is, that $800,000, excuse me, maintains that 70 PCI average value for all of our roadways.
And that is over and above the Powell bill funding of
500?
500?
Yes.
Which is in danger, and does this at all take into consideration the possibility that will be cut?
It does not. It does not.
Will either be cut or eliminated. Well, I guess the third option is it will be the same.
Just explain what the Powell bill is.
Well, the Powell bill funding is what the state reimburses municipalities for local roads, not the state roads, but the local subdivisions and whatever we take over. So they allocate so much funding per year to all the municipalities based on that, and 500-ish was about what we, so it looks like we weren't taking care of any roads. We were spending all our Powell bill money on roads, but it came from this PCI study that we're significantly under what should be to make these roads last, and, you know, the upkeep and the maintenance, filling cracks before they turn into bigger cracks, which turns into needing to be replaced.
What's the typical lifespan of a subdivision road?
25 years, yeah.
The board's probably getting sick of me using this example, but really a lot of what we're focusing on the new money, when you think of road maintenance, a lot of you think of milling and overlaying, right? Resurfacing the actual road. What David was going at there, I think that's where you're going, is that we need to spend more money on preventative maintenance to expand the lifespan of the road. If we do that, we can actually spend our dollar more effectively and stretch it for a longer period. So what we mean by that is, like with your car, it's much cheaper to change the oil than it is to buy a new engine. So like a lot of the preventative things that we're doing now, crack sealing, micro surfacing, you may have seen that around town. Fairhaven's had it done recently, Community Park. It just extends the life. It's much cheaper to do it that way than actually reconstructing the road. So this is a big part of that, is doing it such that we can get to a point where we don't, eventually you always have to reconstruct a road just like you have to replace the engine in your car. But if we can get to where we need to go on a preventative maintenance, we're spending more on prevention than we are on reconstruction. That make sense?
I'd be curious as to what the committees think about the auto property tax. Your thoughts on that, that'd be helpful, Mark and everybody. John?
Come up to the podium?
You could, yeah. I think the question, no, we're sort of informal, and I think this feels more formal than I think we, because we're sitting up here, you're there. This should really be a round table. But one thing we learned in the last month or two is that Stallings is the only town around us that doesn't impose that cost. My wife reminded me that 3 years ago, we would have had 5 cars to go through this $25 when all of our kids were home, teenagers. Now, 2 of them moved out, so we own 3 cars now. One will be moving off to our kid when he gets married. That's a big deal. But one way to think about that is that, at least one way I think about the car tax is, number one, are we missing a revenue source that other towns have? Yes. We've also had a lot of apartment and rentals move into town, and they pay property tax, but it's indirect, right? They pay it through their lease, and that sort of folds into the rent for the apartment. But in general, there's 301 parking spaces at this apartment complex on the very southern end of town where I live, or Chestnut Farms. Those 280 resident, whatever, 264 units, I guess, is what's there. They don't necessarily pay a car tax. So this would be a way to capture a revenue source from those who rent in our community that don't pay a property tax. That's helpful to me, and I think that helps me think through how that's a good source of revenue and can be in some ways tied to the use of our roads. And I think of it as a source to fund street maintenance, so it may not have a line. I'm just curious what everybody else thinks about that. Anybody?
My note was a $25 motor vehicle thing. I heard it aimed at, or is it only gonna be for the structure of the road system?
Yeah, I don't think it's earmarked for that. I could argue for that, but I'm not sure it's earmarked for that. Is that what you're asking, Mark?
Yeah.
Set aside for road maintenance. As you can see, we're setting aside $800,000 in Alex's budget, which, by the way, he's done a fantastic job. We're gonna spend 2 hours tonight from 7 to 9 talking about it, and we're not all happy about the level of revenue that Alex is proposing, even though he's done a great job. We may make some changes tonight. But 800,000 is a lot more than that $25 per car would generate. I think the projections were 360 or so, 75. We have a maximum, by the way, I think of $30 per you could charge, which would add another 20% to that, which would make it 400 and something. Am I right about that? The maximum you can
The
charge.
maximum is 30.
But it's not, but the point is it's gonna fall short of the budgeted number, Mark, for that cost.
And even if it was tied to the road maintenance, would we, I mean, we're talking, right? This is just a question. Would we actually, we would probably still keep it at 800,000, right? And reallocate that money that we put there now somewhere else that's unrestricted.
That's what has happened with the budget. Yes.
Okay, that's what's currently in the budget.
That's the proposed budget, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be 800. We haven't approved the budget yet.
Right.
The mayor suggested earlier today a less number there, and watching the revenues roll in, and you can always do a budget ordinance mid-year if the revenues are exceeding expenses. Because a lot of the things, and I'll harp on this too much, the 5-year revenue projections are just that, and sales tax is a big source, and we just don't know what those will be. That's fair. We have to make some guesses. So other thoughts on that? That's a new source of revenue. Other towns are paying it. It represents probably a penny or so on the sales tax, excuse me, a penny on the property tax.
I personally don't have a problem, but I can see where people would be upset, maybe. But I feel like if you're driving, even if you're renting, you're driving on our roads. And I feel like that we're in a between Matthews, Charlotte, and Indian Trail. And I feel like we need to I feel like a lot of people like living here because of that. And the response time is so quick, et cetera, that spending money on things like better roads is also a safety factor. And if we have more apartments and people don't pay necessarily property tax, and that, why not? I mean, it's just not like it does help. And I think we're at the edge of Union County. And I just feel like, as far as safety of the roads, et cetera, don't have cars, you know, driving down the road, zigzagging.
$25 just for motorized vehicles, or would it be like for a utility trailer, anything with the tag on it?
Anything that gets renewed every year at the registration process, right? You have to do the inspection before you can pay your
Well,
tax.
a lot of trailers have a permanent tag on it, so how would that be collected?
Probably wouldn't then, I would guess.
Yeah, I don't think it would be on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
permanent, so this would, it says it's a municipal vehicle tax, and it's on like your registration, the annual registration that you would pay. That's how this would be paid every year.
So one thing I would just throw out there, is there, it's kind of a question and then I'll leave with a statement though. Close your ears. So I rented for a long time in different cities. I never registered my car. Like I would keep this my home address because I'm living in an apartment, right? I'm sometimes 12. Why am I gonna register my car when I know that I mean, I know by law you're supposed to, but whatever. So that's just,
Chief.
is there a way statute of limitations is passed.
Some places don't have statute of limitations.
It's for certain crimes like murder.
Let's not
Want you to tell us something else?
So my only thought is just like, is there a
Do that
way
pretty
you
quick.
can capture apartments for, say, the spaces that they're, you know, like you rent an apartment, you get assigned space 301. Apartment tracks that, and then they have to pay the fee. I assume there's not, but I'm throwing that out there that I like the idea, especially since people are using the roads, but I also don't want how many people are actually in apartments going to be paying that to be like, oh, well, we're capturing those people. We're probably.
It's a good point.
You're asking, is there a special levy on apartment complexes
Yeah,
or such?
I mean, I'd assume not, but.
I imagine the percentage is pretty low, the people that don't register their cars. I mean,
It's pretty bad here in Mecklenburg County. I mean, it's, matter of fact, there's a big,
Yes, I wouldn't.
there's been articles in the news recently here in Union County because Union County has done a big crackdown on cars that haven't been registered. Is that right? Yeah.
We had, in our neighborhood, I know we had a family that did that. I kept changing, I kept trying to complain about it to somebody.
It's a big problem.
I mean, I guess.
Well, he would know. He would know.
I guess it could be.
I could say probably had just.
Okay.
That's people driving on the roads.
And that's mostly if they're doing something else, right? Yeah. Right.
See, in my case, it wasn't fictitious, I just.
Done with, going through this budget stuff?
This was just showing, the breakout of the expenditures. There wasn't much to talk about here. It was just showing you the different, how they fluctuate. Making up that huge chunk, as well as, yes, sure.
800,000 for the street. Well, I think 2025.
Uh-huh. So 25 and 26, those are just budget amounts. And I mean, yes, we're factoring in, thinking about the fact that cost of, you know, we're gonna see inflation and things like that, but again,
I was just gonna say.
One of the
So-
things, I think one of the things too, that when inflation was at 8% back in that window of time, I don't remember, Kevin was gonna put out a bid for all of our, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, all of the roads in the town in that fiscal year. He wisely said, wait, let's just do half of it in the first part of the year, see if costs come down, and then we can do another contract to get more done. So, but you're right, if inflation goes up and costs go up, you spend 800,000, but you do less work. Kevin's job is to try to make the best use of that dollar.
that's just the town funds. As Councilman Scholl was talking, we do have the Powell bill funds that are the state allocated funds. So, and in current year, we received $569,000 from that funding source.
I have a question just in general to the group. I mean, every year that we do the budget, about 24 hours after we approve of whatever budget we do, obviously, social media blows up. You need to cut this, or you need to cut costs. But nobody ever says what they would like to see cut. So, I mean, I'm always open to, we're here to listen to you guys and the citizens in general. So is there things that you see that we should be cutting, or things we should be allocating money otherwhere? I mean, it's kind of free form here.
I personally do not want to do anything with the police department. I really feel like we have a good system. I know other systems surrounding us, they found themselves in a predicament by not keeping the cost of their salaries up, and they got a lot of riffraff that they had trouble getting rid of. So I support not doing anything with the police department. As far as cutting, the only thing I can think of is when you talk about recycling, to have north, south, central recycling centers. Instead of the trash pickup every other, do we take a look at having those containers where there's glass, there's plastic, there's cardboard, you know, but then we have to have someone who's gonna monitor, because some towns I lived in, they get kind of overfull very quickly, or some people start using it as a dump site with mattresses, et cetera, et cetera. Could that be one place to possibly cut the cost? I have a hard time knowing that Stallings itself, we are limited in growth because of the septic system. And I think that that needs to get addressed, because we cannot grow in order to get more tax revenue. We need that more housing, more development, and we're frozen out of that. And so, from a resident, it's kind of like, why can't we tap into Mecklenburg if Union County is not going to increase our capacity? Thank you. That something needs to give there. So I feel like we're at a disadvantage with looking at Indian Trail just growing in leaps and bounds. Here we can't, because they're saying, slapping our wrist saying we can't do anything more.
And just so that you know, we have gone to Mecklenburg County and talked with them about what it would take to hook up to them, just so you know. The long of it is that there's some financial restrictions there too, because we would have to pay to hook into them. And there would need to be some work done there to make it a viable solution, so.
Oh, not to mention, they're actually facing capacity constraints as well.
Yeah.
Even if we did hook up with them, they may not want us.
What about when we had that amendment?
Yeah,
To educate people, because people are just so afraid. I mean, the people that I talk to, and I explain it to them, and, oh, no, I don't believe you. I know that they're gonna be taxing us, the hotel is gonna get the money from us, and we really have to get it out to everybody in town to understand this. It's not on us, unless we go stay in the hotel.
I know they charge hotel taxes like Myrtle Beach or places like.
Oh, everywhere.
So if
We're-
you're ever taking a vacation, you're paying.
We're like one of the few towns in North Carolina that does not.
Exactly.
Eh,
Yeah.
But we are planning to put it back on the budget for this
Yeah.
year.
And I think a better, media, yeah, education, promotion would help that, just so people would know that that's a tax visitors pay.
Understand that,
To us.
that has some restricted uses, as you would imagine, right?
Well,
But I'm thinking,
Yes, it does.
I think the Park and Recs Department would be a beneficiary of that.
But then it just frees up other money, but it's not a whirlwind of money. It's $60,000 to $80,000. And that's about what we lost when, we all love the hospital, but they don't pay taxes. They pay their CEO $5 million a year, but they can't pay property taxes. So, but I still love them being here, so.
That's how they stay nonprofit.
My concern is this is a no-frill budget. And my concern with a no-frill budget is we're not looking into the future. When you want to talk about Stallings being a town where we are family, we don't have the facilities to have family get-togethers. If you heard me in the minutes even of our meetings, I'm a strong proponent that we have a community center. It's a need. You talk about engaging the community. You can have so many different options. I don't know, some of you may know about the Crew Center and how the Crew Center is set up in Matthews. They have rooms there that people can rent. But it's also, I know where the police, they're limited to offering classes or symposiums or even like the elderly and not being scammed. Where are you gonna have it at? I know some in our neighborhood would really benefit from that, but we couldn't tap into the one they were having at another facility because it was for that facility only, compared to having a room in a community center that people can come into. So I think we're missing out on a wide variety of things, as well as talk about sports. Okay, you can have basketball, you can have volleyball, you can have badminton, of course, you're on that pickleball, gotta throw that in there too. But you can also have, so like there's a track above it, so people can come and walk, when it's inclement weather, they can't use the park here, but they can use that. You can also tap into some kind of, someone wanting to maybe take over a concession stand in there or something, or coffee. I mean, there's ways to also help generate money, but my concern is I don't see any money set aside for looking at that kind of a facility in our community. And I think that's really important to have, to look forward to.
Well, let me address that since I've been on the council longest here, 20 years. We looked at the community center years ago, and our budget right now, the operating expenses, just to cover the operating expenses, is a very large percentage. So we got limited amount of money left over, unless we want to just keep raising taxes. So that's the first thing. The second thing about providing recreational opportunities, and so the community center, we looked at that. Second thing, we looked at Carolina Courts. Years ago, when the bypass was being built, they had to move. We had a handshake agreement with them to come to Stallings, to be built right across from Stallings Elementary. Indian Trail came in with a better deal, basically gave them the land and helped them build it. So we couldn't compete with that because we couldn't give them the land. It wasn't ours to give. So we've looked at those things over the past 20 years. It's just, we got a small amount of money that's left over after we cover our operating expenses. So that's my 2 cents worth on that.
I picture the Stallings Bank of America Community Center. You know, it's gotta come from some, I agree, we really have to increase
Well,
taxes, don't
well-
get me wrong, but I wanted to see the vision of the council to be taking a look at moving, somehow trying to look outside the box on how can we put aside so much money towards that.
Yeah, another project we looked at is we spent $30,000 to review building a 3,000 seat park for AAU baseball, which as any of y'all know, if your kids or grandkids play travel baseball, it's a huge moneymaker. And we couldn't get the votes and to get somebody to build it. And so we were going to try to build it on the back half of, well, one near Stallings Elementary, and when that fell through, near the hospital. So that land's still not, it doesn't require any sewer, so can build it there, but you got to get somebody to pay for that, which town of Stallings is not going to pay for it, so. So we've looked at them. It's just, it all comes down to money. Yes, ma'am.
So from what I can see, it doesn't look like the town has been lavishly spending at any point, and I don't think it's realistic to how do you have more income? And I'm curious to know if retail or housing developers have to and if that's not in place, could it be a conversation for the future?
Yeah.
You mean development fees, subdivision fees?
Whether it be a subdivision, whether it be an Armor Cow Brewery, so retail or housing developments.
Yeah, we can't charge them to come here. We can't, there's laws against that in North Carolina.
Are there taxes that can be?
Oh, well, they'll pay taxes just like everybody else.
I mean, like, more because it's not a homeowner, it's a development company. Are there any revenue sources there?
Other than the property tax of the homeowner. So.
Jesse mentioned the business personal property tax. You and I don't pay that unless you run a small business at your home. Our property tax bill is just our house. But if you run a business, and that's why we're trying to push commercial and retail development, is that inside that business, furnitures, fixtures, computers, machinery, all that adds up. There's some significant source of revenue. You're exactly right. Commercial development is what we are pushing for, and they would pay more in a premium. I think apartment complexes are considered commercial. They may actually pay business personal property too. The only thing I can think of, and you're smart to think through this, was we have rules that require developers to set aside parkland or green space, and if they can't meet it, they can pay a fee in lieu of, and then that helps fund like the Blair Mill Greenway. That's so cool that we probably couldn't have done without those funds. Was I right about you looking at me like?
No, you're right.
I saw some whispering, like, oh, yeah, I
Saying
probably
something
just messed that
over
up. But
here
is
too.
that,
No, you're right,
yeah.
yeah. A lot of other places have much more commercial property, and that's why they have a lot more money than we do. Stallings and Union County in general is predominantly residential, which is not where the majority of your funding comes from as far as property taxes go. Aaron, can I hold the keyboard? If we go back, we do also get sales tax money from the state, but that's not huge. And we've also gotten information from the Department of Revenue recently that they're actually seeing unprecedented decreases in sales tax this year to distribute to the governments lately. So, I mean, the other source of revenue that we could really control would be fees that the town charges for parks and rec programs or planning and zoning things. That's where we could really control stuff. but we're also limited in what we can do just capacity-wise as well, because, you know, with the current staff and land space, there's only so much, and you know, park space, there's only so much we can do as well, so, yeah.
Well, we're gonna wrap up here at 6:15, so there's a couple more things. Somebody mentioned, water and sewer plants. You know, Union County, they don't have a plan, and they admit it. You know, even if they decided tonight, it'd be 8 to 10 years to build the thing. Now, the technology is out there. I don't know if y'all noticed on the agenda, 2 or 3 meetings ago, it's called a package plant that, a fellow in Arkansas does them. He came and made a presentation to us on what it can do, and, you know, businesses are taking advantage of it because Hilton is a customer of theirs. Hilton's going to build their hotel, and they can't build unless they have sewer, so they pay for a package. It's called a package plant, and it's underground. It's new technology, and it's something this council has looked at. So you have to grow, because Union County's not going to do anything. Same things. The other project that Union County has ignored us on is the Silver Line. The rail coming to Matthews, you know, that has changed with the politics in Mecklenburg County, but Linda Paxton, the former mayor, went to Mecklenburg County in the Department of Transportation and talked them into studying bringing it all the way to Stallings near the hospital, which would have been a great benefit to, you know, our residents. So we got a $90,000 grant, thanks to Linda getting that. And we did some work on it, and then the state changed the funding mechanism for that. So the town of Matthews is fighting it right now to get I don't know if it's a food tax or what type of tax it is, sales tax. So they've changed the funding mechanism, and so now Matthews is fighting it. You know, we're helping them just by saying we'll support it, but you know, they're the big dog in the fight. So we've looked at that as well. So you know, I'm always looking at ways to do things, but Stallings can't pay for the line to come from Matthews here. We need Union County's help, and we're not going to get it. So they might not have the money. So I don't know. They didn't give us a reason, but they don't answer the phone on that one. So.
I appreciate you all taking into consideration trying to our federal government can do
It's required.
I don't really, I'm not upset about taxes going up, and I realize that is pretty much the only kind of revenue that we as a community can increase. My concern again is on having the population boom that we could possibly have. And that's kind of where I think we're missing out on. We are a community that is real close to the interstate, real close to Charlotte, and I just see so much building going on not within our community.
There may be a lot more than that you don't know about up on the other half of the northern half.
Yeah.
There's a lot, actually. Behind the Harris Teeter, how many apartments are in that new? It may not be on this side, but there is a lot going on.
Right around the elementary school.
Yep,
Yeah.
that whole area there.
What's our tax rate compared to other towns?
Really hard to do that comparison because
Are we like?
because of the services provided
Yeah,
by each town is different. Like Indian Trail, they contract their police services out. We don't. So, and you go to Waxhaw, they got sewer, water, or not sewer,
Just read some of the rates. Yeah, that's helpful.
they do other services, fire. Monroe does fire.
Is there anybody, a town nearby that has
I mean,
like
each
similar?
county posts tax rates
Uh-huh.
on their website.
Yeah.
So I have the current 25 tax rates for
Uh-huh.
Union County right here. I can just read you a few. Now, obviously, I don't know what anybody is proposing for 26, but these are the current ones. So Marvin's tax rate is 8 cents, Monroe is 50.25. They also have a special downtown district tax of 19.5 cents. Wingate is 34 cents, Marshville is 55, Waxhaw 38.5, Indian Trail 8.5. We, of course, are 21.6, Weddington 2.5, Village of Lake Park 21.25, Fairview 0.02. So, yeah. So, I mean, those that don't do anything, like Weddington provides nothing, they have,
Jesse, could you read Indian Trail?
I'm sorry, Indian Trail's 18.5.
Oh,
That's what it is.
You said 8, that's okay.
we all heard you say eight. Oh,
I'm sorry, no, 18.5. No, sorry, 18.5.
Well, everybody was listening to you because everybody's ears perked up and like, what?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
With Oldmont Road being widened, has there been any interest in businesses coming to, okay,
Matter of fact, Monroe Road has been, the widening, it's been coming, it was supposed to be done in 2018?
No, 2013 was the first.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there are groups that have specifically said that, they don't want to do anything until it's done.
Here- Here's some, while we're talking about money and,
Somebody will come by your grave after you've passed away and yeah, who knows?
here's a number that'll make you feel a little better about us taking care of being financially responsible for your tax dollars. I don't know who did this study for us, but when we did our pay study, they also looked at the other town councils around. So in Stallings, the mayor is paid $7,800 a year. In Indian Trail, the same mayor makes $19,000 a year. Council person in Stallings makes $4,800 a year. And in Indian Trail, that same council member makes $15,000 a year. So just know your money's being well taken care of.
Well,
So, somebody once said, well, stop paying all the politicians and we'll have money. And it was like, you'll be able to pay for half a police car if we do that.
Got a question, hang on.
What are restricted or non-recurring revenues?
So certain revenues are restricted, not Powell bill, because I have those separate by statute, or like grant funds, they're for a specific purpose. Sometimes something might just be a one-time receipt of funds, and so it's just in that separate line item. Our school resource officer is funded with partially funded with grant funds, so that's in that line item. So that's what's in there. It's mostly grants or unusual one-time things.
One clarification, when she says school resource officer, that's a term the Board of Education uses. He's a regular police officer. He's on our police department, he works for the chief there. He carries a gun, and he's not somebody there just to give out hall passes or things like that. He's there to protect us, and I was one of the first ones that, thanks to Chief and Alex and the rest of the council, he was there part-time, and that would be a bad day to get that call. So he's there to protect our children. All right, any other questions, comments? We're gonna go across the street, and Eunice and her team are gonna show us her new park, and we'll do a little ribbon cutting. But again, thank you for your service, your time, and everything, for volunteering on these committees.
And if y'all have any other questions or comments or anything, I mean, this group is one of the best in replying. Just go online and all of our email addresses are there. Feel free to reach out to any of us at any time.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Aaron, all in favor?
Aye.